Okay, so this piece, which I'm going to share now, is it's called Routers Are Computers, and I produced it specifically to be played on wireless routers with software called Pure Data. So I'll just hit play, and maybe after some time I will start talking over the track. Sine waves are produced with software, as I mentioned, which is written in a graphical programming language. The sounds are just like, waves. That's as simple as I can say, and they're generated by a low-frequency oscillator, which changes the sound of changes the pitch of each sound wave. So there are like 8 of these, and there were, in this installation that I made, there were 5 routers, and these wireless routers are exactly what you think they are. They're sort of small white boxes that connect computers and smartphones and televisions and all this stuff to the internet. So you plug it into the sort of socket at your house, and then it maybe has like Ethernet ports on it, and you can sort of connect your computer to it or your phone to it wirelessly. And I effectively hacked on these wireless boxes and installed Linux on it, which is a free operating system that anyone can download from the internet, and then did a complicated sort of thing called cross-compiling, which is where you use a computer. So the routers and computers often have different sorts of processors. So processors have a particular architecture. Like, for example, your phone probably has an ARM architecture, whereas your computer probably has an x86-64 architecture. and this is to do with like the way that the way that the processor is physically built, I believe, or how it's programmed, or both. And routers, in this case, have what's known as a MIPS processor, which is yet another type of processor. So when you make software for a computer, it has to run on that processor. And when you make software for a router, it has to run on the router's processor. But if you try and run software built for a processor that's inside of a computer on a router, it won't work because the processors are different. So what you need to do, what I did, is to do this thing called cross-compiling, where you effectively take the software on the you build the software on a laptop, and you tell the laptop to make it to run on the processor for the router. So it's like compiling it, which is the normal process, except that you don't do it on the router because the router is like really, really slow. It has, for example, one core and a single thread and one processor, whereas your computer may have like 16 cores or 12 cores and multiple threads on each of those cores inside the processor, which makes it a lot faster and it has a lot more memory. So the router that I was working with had, for example, like really small amount of memory and a very constrained processor, and this meant that cross-compiling was absolutely essential because that was how I got the software to run on the router. So I knew I wanted to make it in Pure Data, which is this program that is very similar, if you've heard of it, to Max MSP, and that I think it's even made by the same person, I think, and then that person sort of developed Max MSP out of Pure Data. Yes, so I knew I wanted to make it with Pure Data, and therefore I had to cross-compile a lot of stuff in order to make Pure Data work. So just making the patch in Pure Data was like the last step of this process. But I knew, for example, that I had to make Pure Data work, and I had to get a very low latency audio server to run underneath Pure Data so that it could communicate with the sound card, which I had plugged into the router via the USB port. And to some people that might sound slightly absurd, like why would you plug a sound card into a router? But I was simply interested in whether it was possible and the challenge that it presented technically. And so then again, in order to make the sound card work, there needs to be additional software, like there's this thing called the Advanced Linux Sound Architecture Library, which is also known as the ALSA. And this allows you to use sound on Linux computers. And so I had to cross-compile ALSA in order to work with the real-time audio server, which is called Jack. And then there were like various dependencies, which you have to sort of tell the software about when you create this program to run on the routers. And that involved sort of using compile time flags and like C flags in order to sort of link the binaries the right way. And I appreciate this all sounds very technical, but this is what went into it. And this allowed me to effectively then write data to a USB drive. And because they were all identical models of the same router, I could copy the files to 5 USB drives and plug them into the back of these routers. 2 of the routers had USB hubs, and 2 of them had the sticks in the back. And then they were able to talk with each other via this thing called Open Sound Control, which is an amazing communication protocol, which allows messages to be sent in very low or real-time speeds between different devices that are capable of communicating via audio. And Pure Data works with that. And effectively, that was how I made this sound work.